November 5th meeting of the SURG Response Subcommittee meeting. So I will hand it off to Crystal to do our roll call.
Good morning. Dr. Shayla Holmes.
Present.
Dr. Terry Kearns.
Present.
Nancy Lindler.
Present.
Christine Payson.
Present.
Senator Jeff Stone.
Present.
All members are present.
Great. Thank you so much for all of our members being here. We appreciate it. It's an important meeting we have today. At this point, we'll move on to item number 2 on the agenda, which is public comment. Public comment will be received via Zoom by raising your hand or unmuting yourself when asked for public comment. Public comment shall be limited to 3 minutes per person, and no action may be taken upon a matter raised during a period devoted to comments by the general public, but until the matter itself has been specifically included on an agenda as an item upon which action may be taken pursuant to NRS 241.020. If you're dialing in from a telephone, please dial 669-444-9171. When prompted, enter the meeting ID, which is 868-3331-1069, and then press *6 so the host can promptly unmute you. I would add too, please do not utilize the chat for anything other than technical issues, because the content is not necessarily available to the general public, which is a requirement of our open meeting law. Do we have any public comment?
I do not see anyone coming off of mute or raising their hands at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 3 at this point. We will have another public comment session at the end of the meeting. Our item number 3 is a review and approve minutes from the September 18th, 2024 Response Subcommittee meeting. First, I'll ask if anyone has any changes or amendments they'd like to make. If none of the committee members don't, I did have one. It is a change which is on page 16, which is right above item number 8 from those minute meetings. It's the 4th paragraph, and on that it says the Clark County Overdose Fatality Review. That is not the official name. It's the Clark County Opioid Task Force. So I would like the meeting minutes to reflect that change from Clark County Overdose Fatality Review to Clark County Opioid Task Force.
Move the minutes with those amendments.
Thank you, Senator Stone. Do I have a second?
Christine Payson, I'll second.
Oh, Christine for the second.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So we have a motion by Senator Stone and a second from Christine Payson. At this point, all members who approve those minutes say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? At this point, members present, which is all, the meeting minutes are approved. And we'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is a presentation on the Clark County Opioid Task Force from Joanna Jacobs, who's the Clark County Government Affairs Manager. Thank you so much, Joanna, for being here, and we look forward to your presentation.
You got it. Thank you. And good morning, everybody. It's great to see you. Crystal is going to help me navigate the slides here for you, but I'm very happy to be here just to present as we're an update on the Regional Opioid Task Force that we've been convening in Clark County. So Crystal, if you want to move on to the next slide, just a basic overview. I know some of you may be familiar with this effort, but this was due to the passage of legislation last session we convened, the bill was effective on October 1st of last year. We convened the task force in January of 2024. We've had 5 in-person meetings. It's quite a large committee. It is, but so that was a challenge in getting everybody together, but we've managed to have 5 pretty detailed in-person meetings. And then we've also convened several virtual meetings to work on a final report, which is required by the legislation to be filed at the end of this year, in advance of the 2025 session. And that is going to go to the Legislative Council Bureau. And Crystal, I'll go to the next slide. Just a review about the, I stuck this slide in here on the Assembly Bill 132, just as a reminder and a fresh as we're heading into the next legislative session. This was the last legislative session. But today, I guess when we was asked to give this presentation, we were asked to really highlight one of the components of the bill, which said it was permissive in the bill, but it said that after we had taken a look at what data is available in the state and kind of gotten a look at what is out there, that we could elect to do a systemic review of fatalities occurring after October 1st, so after the bill's effective date, to try and get a sense of where we are in the community and where we're really targeting resources in our community. And also we had been empowered in that legislation to look at the highest zip codes where fatalities are occurring in Clark County. And that is what we did. So I'm going to present to you some of the data that has come out through this committee. And Crystal, we can go to the next slide. So when we looked at, and I will tell you, this effort of really the systemic death review, it was a little bit of a challenge with such a large committee, but it was led by our Southern Nevada Health District and their epidemiology team, as well as Melanie Rouse, who's our coroner, and she chairs the committee. She and the SNHD team looked at the volume of cases that were occurring after October 1st, 2023 in our county, and really ran it through August 1st. We did most of this review in September before the committee, so we cut it off the month before. This took a little bit of effort on behalf, because when we looked at the closed cases only that have been officially closed through our coroner's office, there were more than 600 opioid-related fatalities in Clark County just in that time period. And so really, we did not have the resources. We were talking to Terry about, we did not have the resources to look at all 600 of those cases. So really worked with the committee members to narrow our focus to 3 distinct areas that they all agreed on, which we should focus on trying to discover, which was the highest zip codes within that subcategory where there was an opioid overdose fatality, and the age demographic groups with more than a 50% increase in death in that timeline, because and emerging drug-related fatalities. I think when we were working on this bill last session, I think one of the goals originally of the legislation was to get data out there and to then make it timely for our community to respond. So it makes the idea was that if you have data that we're not going to be reviewing it years later to see what happened, but that it would be actionable data that we could then target community responses. That's why we looked at the 50% increase, because that shows a trend, and that is something that we could use then in our community when we are doing the response. So if we could go to the next slide. Here is kind of an overview of how we grouped together the data. This, I will go into more detail in my other slides, so you don't have to look at this really fast, but we highlighted several of the zip codes in category 1, where we had the highest, and this is overall the zip codes in that category that I presented on the previous slide. And then we also looked at where we had seen the marked increase in deaths, and what we found is that there's been dramatic increases in these age groups in the second arrow that we have in fentanyl deaths, and then fentanyl combined with meth. And then category 3, some emerging trends, which really is where we could really target resources. And what we're seeing right now is an increase in smoking, or that is smoking in this sense is just inhalation of fentanyl and kind of new novel substances that are showing up in our community. We can go to the next slide, Crystal, please. So here's a slide where these are the zip codes. When we looked at all the 600 deaths, we kind of categorized them out. These are our highest zip codes. What is important to realize here is that some of these are central Las Vegas, and that is where a lot of the prevention and harm reduction activities by the health district and the various providers who are doing that here in our community are actually focusing their efforts. So they're doing tremendous work. But what we found when we looked at these zip codes where the deaths had occurred in this last time period, there were 5 zip codes where there were no activities on naloxone distribution, or these are our outlying zip codes. And I say this for Senator Stone because he's here in Clark County, that when we compared the data from PACT Coalition and then these zip codes, we saw we were missing 89119, 89103, 89011. 89123 and 89115. So this is really good data for our group to have, because then the health district sits on our committee and then they can look at this and say, as they plan in the next quarter, that maybe they may want to intervene in these zip codes. And we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, here's category 2. This, I'm just going to tell everybody in case it's not apparent, I am the government affairs manager, so I'm not the scientist, okay? But this is a slide that the Southern Nevada Health District put together. And they took the liberty of highlighting where they saw the most concern. And that is really what we had highlighted in those kind of in that slide where I had the 3 arrows were really where we saw higher than 50%. We saw increase. And this isn't necessarily what I think people may have expected when we went into this, but really we saw it really increase in the ages of I guess I could say middle age, 30 to 34, 35 to 39, and 40 to 49. And this is the yellow circles that Brandon from the health district highlighted for us here are the trends that we saw in fentanyl deaths, and then the combination, which I mentioned, of meth and fentanyl as part of the death fatality records, where you can see here 137.5% increase in the red over on the right. That is a significant concern for the committee. I won't belabor this, but you can see this is where we really tried to look and see where are we seeing the most impact, and over 50%. And that's where we were able to look at some of this demographic data to target maybe some of our public health interventions. So, and I guess I'll go to the next slide here and we'll summarize. And I'm going fast and I apologize, but I figure I'll try and answer questions if we have them. Again, no, I'm not I'll just take down your questions and see if I can get them answered for you probably more accurately. Here's category 3. This is kind of emerging fatality patterns that we've seen on the nationwide. There's been some attention on fentanyl, right? And about this issue of increased deaths nationwide. These are links and to nationwide articles and studies on this issue, injecting versus smoking activities and things like this, that there's been, everybody at the health district is watching. And we know that in these articles, deaths from meth and fentanyl have increased by really a large amount. We have seen that the novel substances that we started to see, and this is something our coroner highlighted early on, that there has been some activity that they had seen where there was these novel substances that were being found in tourists who might have been traveling to Las Vegas, but we also started to see this present from actual residents here in Nevada. So it shows you that the activities are growing. So we've seen xylazine increase from 1 death in 2020 to 5 deaths in 2024, and then carfentanil among Clark County, 0 in 2020, and then 10 deaths. This is kind of an emerging substance that we are starting to see in our community, that is on their radar, both at our coroner's office and at the health district. So, and all in all, I will tell you, when we looked at, when we did the deeper dive, as we go to the next slide, Crystal, I will tell you, when they looked at kind of the overlay, we reviewed in deeper dive 15 cases. That might not sound like a lot, but it was a tremendous amount of work, because we looked at hospitalization records, PMP data that we've seen. We also tried to review all of the interviews associated from the coroner's office and kind of a deeper dive into the cases to look at some of the legislation. Also asked us to identify social determinants that may lead to substance abuse generally, and that may be looked at for prevention activities in this space. And so these are some of the things that after kind of looking at the data and bringing it down to the 15 cases that our coroner said, let's flag and see what out of these categories that we suspected, what are the rates, you know, what did we find? And I think we'll go, and this includes some of the social determinants of health, like such as job loss, unemployment, unhoused, if you're unhoused, or if you lack permanent housing. This is a significant issue in our community, and this is something that we wanted to look at. That we also looked at, you know, issuance, you know, hospitalization rates, and have we seen people at the hospital, and are they being discharged? Are there recurrent hospitalizations? Is there a history of interaction with law enforcement, for example, or ETOH here? You may know, I didn't, I had to look it up, is alcohol use. So this is the alcohol use or other substances also that we wanted to look at. We'll go to the next slide, Crystal, and we'll show you what we found. So here, this slide was probably the best one that the committee was able to look at, because in doing our final report to the legislature, we are going to use this data to make some recommendations on where we think that we could have opportunities for collaboration or possible policy change, right? And just a few things, I want to tell you the effort that went in. Our chair is, as I mentioned, was our coroner, and she did an all areas medical request to all the hospital facilities in Southern Nevada. She looked at the PMP reports for the decedents and also their criminal history. And this data, I think, is pretty, she did as complete as she could in really compiling this data. And this is where we had some significant findings, especially where we saw, I'll highlight in the left column. So where we had, and the risk factors here is really the PMP risk factor, the prescription monitoring programs. But if there was a risk factor of methamphetamine, like we saw 83% of the deaths had gone to the hospital with a complaint about pain. She highlighted this one, and that there was also a higher history of unemployment and also PMP records. So we know that they were there. And I think I have this on another second slide, but this one thing we identified is the PMP only goes back 2 years. So this is within a 2-year time frame that we found. Another significant finding in the second column was a percentage with the risk factors for fentanyl abuse was 100% of the folks that there was cross-reference there, had a history of going to the hospital and also hospitalization with the complaints about pain. 100% had a history of substance abuse already. In the third category, there was also, and this is as documented in the medical record, okay? So this is a history of smoking fentanyl, there was a history of prior substance abuse. That was something that we've seen in our emerging trends, and novel substances, 100% also had a prior history of substance abuse. This is probably not surprising, I think, to the people who work in this space, but this is really what we've seen. And then in the last column, we looked at the percentages across all the groups. So some significant opportunities for collaboration where there's history of, seeking care at a hospital for complaints of pain, and then prior history of substance abuse at 93%, and then 80% obviously unemployed. This is a big issue for us here, and this is something that we can look at. I think this one, we'll show up in our final report as we kind of summarize some of these findings and where we think that we can intervene. So next slide is really, this is something that was compiled by the folks doing the review as some key highlights that and this is where they noted that this may be, there may be prior records on this, but the PMP only goes back, prescription monitoring program, just a PMP, I know it goes back 2 years. So that was time limited, but we have above average PMP reports, positive urine drug screens, or was there a lack of a urine drug screen for substances in the case files? There's admission to drug abuse is where the patient may have self-disclosed it somewhere in the hospital records that they said that they were, that they had a history of or current activities of drug abuse, and then unemployment. And then, as I mentioned, the hospitalizations with complaints about pain. So, the next slide is just something I wanted to highlight, because one of the questions I had when we were prepping for this presentation was, are there regional, in the report that you're going to do, are there regional impacts versus statewide recommendations? This certainly is a regional condition in Southern Nevada of extreme heat. It's something that we struggled with in particular last summer with some of the record heat that we've seen. And this does have an impact that we have been able to quantify. If we go to the next slide, this is just like kind of a title thing, but our coroner has been asked, especially after this past summer, to look at heat-related death. And one of the things that she has tried to highlight has been the impact of certain drugs on your risk of heat-related death, that they have physiologic conditions by taking some of these drugs, and certainly opioids, that are going to really impact your ability to self-regulate heat. And you may be more, I guess, I was going to say, and now I'm losing the word. We may see that heat is going to make you more possible. It's more possible to have a fatality. I'm totally losing the word I was trying to use. I apologize. And one thing we bolded in the far right is that this is something that we will consider in Southern Nevada, because there is a variation in naloxone required to antagonize different drugs, right? And agonists that is really there when you have hyperthermia, excuse me. And that is something that we are looking at. If we go to the next slide, Crystal, this was a 2023 data. Okay, so this kind of bears out. This is a month-to-month drug-related deaths in Clark County. And you can see this is not just the October 1st, after October 1st data, but this is 1 year of deaths. And blue is drug only, and then the orange is the heat, environmental condition, and then the green is where we have both present. And in particular, you can see that highest bar is July. Okay, so June, July, and August is where we see this ramp up quite significantly in our community. And in fact, if we go to the next slide, even if heat is not a factor, this is something that the coroner impressed upon me. Even if he is not anywhere a factor in the medical record, you can see the pattern of drug-related deaths here in Clark County in the summer. And this is something that, the coroner, I've gotten to know her quite a bit in my 5 years at Clark County, and she says that she operates in surge capacity for our whole community between May and September. And you can see this is just the drug related. That's not, she handles everything else, but this is just drug. And you can see that this is a factor. We'll probably highlight this one as something that impacts in particular our region. If we go to the next slide, I just put in here for the scientists. This was actually a PhD candidate who really did this study within our office of Clark County. And then there's some also, we can get you copies of this, but these are some studies that we've done recently on the effect of extreme heat in Clark County. And then the final slide is just my wrap up on next steps, which is really where we are currently. We are going to summarize everything that we have been presented and some of the recommendations based on the data that has been presented to the task force in a legislative report that is required by the Assembly bill. I put a link in here, hopefully, but you could probably Google it and find that we have a dedicated webpage in Clark County on our Clark County website for this task force, where we have our task force members listed, but we also have all of the meeting materials, presentations given, and the audio of all the meetings if you want to dig in a little bit more. And then the final meeting, really official meeting that we have that we're trying to narrow down and try to get everybody together on the final report currently is next week. Let me just check the calendar. Yes, November 13th. I think it is next week or the week. November 13th is the date of our next meeting, and we're getting really close to finalizing some recommendations. So after that point for the group, we should have our final report done and available to download on the website. I don't want to kind of tell you what is going into the report. They're still deciding, and it's a large group, so they still have some time to get it together, but we will we do broadcast the meeting, so November 13th, if you want to, that's a good one to look up or see, especially if we're talk through the final report on November 13th. And that concludes my presentation, Madam Chair. So I can answer any questions if you have them. And I didn't do the depth review myself, but I can take back any questions you may have. I can't answer to our lovely Madam Coroner.
Great. Thank you so much. That was a really insightful and great presentation. I just wanted to highlight to everyone that we have many reasons for being interested in Clark County Opioid Task Force report, but previously this subcommittee had recommended having either county or regional level overdose fatality reviews. And that part didn't come out, but the Clark County having the opioid task force and doing that review was part of theirs. So we wanted to follow that and see if we wanted to re-energize that recommendation after we saw your report. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is, I know in 2022, nationwide, there was information that overdose deaths had decreased. In looking at that data, though, there were 9 states where overdose deaths actually increased. Most of those were Western states, and I think as highlighted so nicely in this report is because we're seeing the increase of fentanyl in our drug supply, and then some of these other novel drugs such as xylazine and carfentanil. At this point, I'll open it up, see if the committee members have any questions. Shayla, it looked like you came off mute. Did you have a question?
I did. I mean, maybe as best as I can formulate questions, which usually is just like me rambling for a while till I find a point. Like, wow, like that's a lot of data. And to Terry's point, how we had, you know, made a recommendation that perhaps overdose fatality reviews, bringing that out to like different regions or different counties and what that could look like. I suppose to put you on the spot,
Sure.
did you find going through this subcommittee and having these meetings to be beneficial, and did it lead to, and I realize just in a year it's hard to say what it led to, but do you see meaningful change coming out of a community response from going through this exercise like this last year with this subcommittee and pulling that all together?
I guess Joanna Jacob, for the record, I'll respond in this way. I think that I'm hoping it will be meaningful. I think that the task force members hope that it'll be meaningful. And I think that what was really helpful in the space of having kind of a regional approach as opposed to housing it in one particular city, or, you know, or having multiple of these committees, which was one of the amendments at one point on this bill, to put it into a place where we're hosting it, but we had law enforcement involved, we had the health district involved, we had all of our county functions being impacted, social service, juvenile justice, we had providers, you know, the PACT coalition, we had the community providers there, we had our fire department who works in the rural parts of Clark County, who are seeing everybody's being impacted and they're all engaged. And I hope that, I guess what I will respond in this way. I think what made it helpful to us here is that it was somewhat limited, you know, or that it was not limited, but manageable. We were able to really try and prioritize based on the terms of the bill, something that we were able to accomplish. And I think that the task force members, one of the recommendations may be, one of the ones that they are considering is maybe to consider some sort of regional multi-agency examination of this, because each of the people involved in the task force are being impacted. The health district, the law enforcement community, you know, everybody's touching this space. And so I think that they found this helpful to kind of look at this, as certainly in the terms of looking at the zip codes in a very specific way, using the medical data. The medical examiner data was helpful to us to figure out where to intervene. And I'm hoping that that will be one of the next steps. I don't know if that answers your question. I think
No,
this
it totally does. Yeah.
one of the things, I guess I'll just answer this too. I worked with one of our county commissioners on the amendment to this bill that really had us pilot it here in Clark County. And that was the intent, is that maybe we'll try and pilot it and keep it flexible. I think it will depend on each county, you know, and on who you want to have at the table. You know, and it's going to be specific to each county, but we wanted it flexible and maybe to try and pilot this and see if other counties wanted to replicate it. I'll answer it that way. Okay, go ahead.
No, I really appreciate that, because I think if we consider it for ourselves and if we're looking at it across the state, that regional is probably more appropriate when you consider some of our smaller counties wouldn't even have enough data.
Yeah.
But they are potentially impacted. You mentioned, you know, the different membership, and you mentioned your coroner. And so did that bill line out who had to participate? Because you talk about this big subcommittee, and I think about subcommittees and them being big makes it really hard sometimes. So if you could identify some folk, like you mentioned, like fire, sheriff, health district, and the coroner, like, were there anybody else that you were like, they really needed to be there for this to be impactful?
Okay, so the legislation did specifically, in the last version of it, did list who was going to be on the task force. So we had that defined in the bill.
Okay.
I did not mention that we had the school district on our committee. And I think that was part of even though it's not where we saw the deaths happening, we know it's an opportunity to do prevention services earlier if we have the school district there. And one of the pieces of the bill was where we could potentially partner, and want to identify potential partners. So we had, I think it was helpful to have the providers at the table, because we had specifically in the legislation a requirement that we needed to have someone who specialized in addiction medicine. And it is so technical, I guess is what I would say, and it helped them to be at the table along with the other county folks. Like it was really specified in the bill that we should have, the coroner is really important because they have the records. I guess I would say the health district's super important because they also have the prevention activities and some of the data and the records. So you need your data experts, you need your providers, and then all the places where these cases are being touched, and law enforcement, fires, first responders, I think it was super helpful to have this particular group. We also had community health workers as there, because they are there as people who are often like the first touch to a system. And maybe that was super important. And then we had our substance abuse coalition, the prevention coalitions there too. So that structure worked for us. There may be conditions in other counties. I would say we wanted to do a wide swath. It was a big committee, but we managed to get it together. And I think it helped to have that many people at the table.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And I mean, just like, wow, that heat death component, super fascinating. I really am interested in how we get ahead of that type of marketing. Because I mean, while Clark's really hot, other parts of the state can get
hot
up
too.
there in range too. Yeah. So I think that's a super interesting finding from you guys. Okay, I'll stop now.
Sure. Happy to share some of, I was going to look and see really quickly if it was a specific heat index, Shayla. I don't know. I will follow up. Maybe I'll send that to Terry or to Crystal after the meeting and see if there's a temperature. I don't have that in front of me on what temperature they used as like the bottom point of the extreme heat. I can look that up.
Thank you. I had a quick question. What was the funding for the task force?
There, Joanna Jacob, for the record, no funding.
Okay.
So we absorbed it. That's why we piloted it in Clark. We absorbed the kind of the administration of the task force. It sits with the county, and it's the language in the bill was that the county is responsible for staffing it, and the staffing it, and the administrative work of convening the task force.
Thank you. Any
Well,
other
we wouldn't be
questions?
opposed to funding, I guess is what I would say, as many of you are not.
Yeah, I would just
Yeah.
bring that up because I know that was an issue in the prior legislation. It would have been an unfunded mandate. Senator Stone, did you have a question or comment?
I did. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very educational. One of my concerns is we're starting to see carfentanil, which is much more deadly than fentanyl, for heaven's sakes. Yeah. Do our fentanyl detection kits, will they detect carfentanil as well? Do you know?
That I do not know. I can find out for you, Senator, and find out. I think that's one of the challenges on fentanyl has been that often people did not understand what level, like it was not capable to know how much you were ingesting. And so I'll try and find out for you, sir, and no, I can find out from the health district or from the coroner.
I would imagine it probably is because they're so chemically related. It's just a few groups are modified, but it makes it, I don't know, 100 times more potent than fentanyl. So you have unsophisticated people that are cutting this stuff, and they usually don't cut it right, and that's where you're seeing a lot of fatalities. And I think your research showed that you've seen 10 so far this year, and the theme seems to be that things are moving west, really. So I'm really concerned about that. And then the fatalities, were those broken down by people that inhaled these combinations of methamphetamine and fentanyl versus IV use. I know that many people are going the inhalation route because they think it's safer, but I was just curious if they broke down the deaths as to the mode of administration.
I'm looking at the slide with the chart from the corner. So it looks like they did break it down to the percentage when it says risk factor of smoking fentanyl. That was inhalation. I can find out. I don't know about. It may not have been reported in the data that she reported, but I can look and see if she did that in her data review on the method used and see if it got broken down then in that way, or she's capable of breaking it down.
And then just one final question. Is there a breakdown? All these deaths are they only being reported as Clark County residents, or do we have tourists that are coming here that are dying, and are they a part of our statistics?
Okay, so this one, I don't know if I have the data for you today, but this is a significant one that, and it was not in this presentation, but in an earlier presentation where we had the coroner presented just about her office. She does track whether the death that she's investigating is a tourist or a resident. So it is capable to maybe pull that data and see. She's the one that flagged carfentanil because that was one case that she flagged early on as something that she wanted to look at in this review, because she flagged the case that she worked on. It was the first time that she saw that it was a resident and not a tourist. That death was a resident, and that was something that she wanted to look at. So I'm saying she can do that breakdown. Likely this data that she presented to the committee was not broken down in any sense of resident versus tourist, but just on a zip code of where the death occurred.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions from committee members? I don't see anyone coming off mute or raising their hand. So Joanna, thank you so much. I can't begin to tell you how important this report is and all the work that the task force did in compiling the report.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I can send you some of the follow-up information for you to distribute to everybody. So thank you again.
You know, let me just ask you one question. You heard me say that we were looking at whether we wanted to revitalize our former recommendation about having county or regional level OFRs, overdose fatality reviews. Is that something that will be a recommendation, or you may not know that at this point? And would you support us doing that?
I'm not sure if I can respond to that fully yet, because I want to be sensitive to the fact that the task force hasn't finalized their recommendations. I think that from what I've heard so far, they are interested in seeing it continue in some fashion. I think the scope of it, should it be expanded, is something we would have to look at, see what resources are available so that we could support the effort. It is really important. To be determined if that's okay. I know that's really shaky for me to say. I would love to tell you yes, but the task force is so, I want to be sensitive to their deliberations and see, and I think the members certainly seem to be leaning that way, and I think the members themselves would support that effort, is my feeling. That's just my opinion. So stay tuned on that on our next meeting, I guess, and see where they are. I just sense that, you know, they're a opinionated group, and I want to make sure that I'm sensitive to their final meeting. Yeah.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I will definitely be listening in on that meeting if I don't
Great.
attend in person. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
At this point, we'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is to finalize and adopt our recommendations. And I'll say, Joanna, you're welcome to stay, but if you have other commitments, we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. So just to highlight in the recommendations that we presented at the last full SURG meeting, any of the items in red indicate a suggested change, and questions and comments received at the October SURG meeting are also included for your consideration. And please refer to the SURG combined recommendations, October 2024 recommendation handout for any additional information, and that includes that urgency, advancement of racial equity and capacity on those recommendations. And that some of that language in the recommendations may have changed. Moving on to our recommendations, the first recommendation, which was submitted by me at the request of some members of one of the Northern Regional Policy Board, was to recommend, originally this was to recommend legislation for a statewide definition of recidivism, but we changed it to recommend state agencies under the legislative, judicial, and executive branches involved with deflection and diversion programs have a comprehensive definition of recidivism and policies related to measuring and reporting that recidivism. The reason this came up is because right now the only known definition is through the Department of Corrections, and that's a return to prison within 3 years. But that doesn't work for all of our agencies. And I know looking at some of the like the FAST teams, there isn't a definition, so that makes the makeup a little different. And in trying to evaluate those teams, you're kind of evaluating apples against oranges. So that was really the justification for bringing this forward. And I would say that we did look at some states that did have statewide definitions versus some states that really delved into what we recommended here with the state agencies having a definition. We looked at the Wisconsin framework for defining and measuring recidivism. And after receiving feedback from the sheriffs and chiefs, they said it needed to be more than just rearrest. That Wisconsin framework does look at reoffense, rearrest, recharge, reconviction, and reincarceration as those measurements that they would look at. So other than that, there were no suggested revisions. Any comments or questions from the committee?
I just have one, and I fully support the effort to redefine recidivism. And you talk about that there's, this is the idea is going to be presented as a BDR. Who will be sponsoring that BDR?
Well, originally we were going to have a BDR, but what we decided is instead of having a BDR, go to those state agencies and make the recommendation to them to have their agency have a definition. So we took the BDR piece out.
So it doesn't need any state legislation. This is just going to be a redefinition by these agencies as they relate to what we're doing.
Yeah, more a policy issue for them.
Got it.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep. Other questions? Okay, let's move on to the next slide. The next recommendation is recommendation number 2, which was submitted by Dr. Holmes, and it was recommend research into the implementation of statewide data sharing agreements with the chief data officer of our state and implementation of a cross-sector database housing multiple points of data across prevention, treatment, recovery, and criminal justice to include data such as controlled substance outlets, tobacco, cannabis, and alcohol to help tailor interventions geographically. I will highlight to you that the response subcommittee had the recommendation for that cross-sector database, but through one of the other committees, I believe it was a prevention subcommittee, they had one looking at the controlled substance outlets such as tobacco, cannabis, and alcohol. So we merged those 2 recommendations together. And there were no suggested revisions at that last SURG meeting. But there was one question as to the level of data collection and if it is at the individual level or aggregated. And Dr. Holmes explained that it is at the individual level, but de-identified. And there was a question as to whether our state has such an office, which we do. I would open it up to questions or further comments. And Shayla, if you have anything you want to add, as this was your recommendation.
I wouldn't add anything, and I have no recommendations or further comments either.
I would highlight that we did bring the chief data officer into these conversations and into the recommendations. So this wouldn't be something we would be kind of pushing on them as a surprise, but that they would know. And the kind of the example we used was that out of the Commonwealth of Virginia, who had a great program. And it brought in different data points, such as from prevention coalitions, from law enforcement, from public health. So it was a very comprehensive database. If there's no other questions or comments, we'll move on to the next recommendation, which is recommendation number 3. Again, this one was submitted by Dr. Holmes. It's to support the collaborative proposal to the Fund for Resilient Nevada to conduct wastewater sampling of high schools, college, university campuses, and bars, nightclubs, and use that information gained to develop public health awareness programs, deploy targeted naloxone, increase provision of fentanyl test strips to targeted locations, and to develop a plan for expanding high-risk substance wastewater surveillance in our state, and review the outcomes from this pilot program to identify if it and similar targeted programs may aid in the community response. So as you can see, the red word of wastewater, that was the suggestion, was to add wastewater to that first sentence. And I would highlight too that it is my understanding that the Fund for Resilient Nevada was in negotiations for funding this program out of UNLV. So if, hey, Shayla, if you have anything else to add, or are there any other questions?
I don't have anything to add. I totally agree with adding wastewater up there. I knew what we were talking about, but it's good that everybody else also knows what we're talking about. And yeah, last I heard they were being funded. But that's why our recommendation also includes the reviewing the outcomes of, to see if it would be of benefit in the future.
Thank you for that. That highlighted. My question was, if it's already funded, do we need to push this forward? But you very eloquently highlighted that we want to review the outcomes. So. Okay, if there's no other discussion, we'll move on to recommendation number 5. I'm sorry, 4. Recommendation number 4, resolve the conflict between the Good Samaritan Drug Overdose Act and the Drug-Induced Homicide Law. Immediate actions may include recommending community-level education using best practice guidelines, as well as education for law enforcement personnel, and exploring options for altering the Good Samaritan language to expand coverage to a greater population of individuals living with substance use disorder. There were no suggested revisions or discussion. And again, this was submitted by Dr. Holmes. If you have anything you would like to add.
I would just like to make sure that, I guess, this is here because we don't want to lose it. It was a recommendation that we had previously. There's been a lot of conversation around the Good Samaritan language being good enough from those that work on the legal side of the house, but those with lived experience continue to tell us that it's not. And while I don't have a great detailed way of correcting that, I wanted to keep this recommendation in because I want us to continue to explore it. I don't want it to be lost as we still continue to see instances where there is overdose and nobody at the scene. And so we want people to be able to call 911 without fear. And we want people to not die on the side of the street if that is what's happening. Or hiding behind bushes. I think that was a story that was shared by someone that they may call 911 and then they may go outside and hide. And so, or they push naloxone and they don't call 911, which we know is also risky behavior and very dangerous. So, yeah, it's a placeholder really, as we continue to try to encourage folks to to bring other things forward that might work.
Thank you for that. And Senator Stone, I have a question for you. As
Yes.
a legislator, what we added to this was exploring the options for altering the Good Samaritan language to expand coverage to a greater population of individuals living with substance use disorder. I wonder, is that specific enough, or do we need to provide some type of different language that would be useful for legislators to have?
No, I think that'd be appropriate. I think that would be appropriate.
Great.
I really appreciate Dr. Holmes in making this recommendation, and as far as the Good Samaritan laws, and again, that would require a BDR, correct? And so, who would be the sponsor of such a BDR? I would be interested if nobody has it, because I think we're losing some lives out there because people are afraid to, might have supplied a drug to somebody that was overdosing, just vacating the scene. We need to provide immunity for somebody that's saving somebody's life that's overdosed. So what is the mechanism moving forward? And forgive my ignorance, because it's the first time I've served on this committee.
No, it's a great question. We do not have anyone to sponsor this BDR. What we would have done is, obviously the Attorney General has some, DHHS has some. If neither, we're gonna pick this up. We would then start looking for someone to support it. So, Shayla, do you have anything to add?
I think so. Original conversations, if I remember correctly, from last annual report and recommendation, it's been a while since we've had some presentations on this, is that the drug-induced homicide law that goes alongside the Good Samaritan language is rarely utilized. And so that, from the attorneys that have presented to us and the legal side of the house, they're like, it's really not utilized that much. So we think it's sufficient. But law enforcement and the legal side of the house have concerns about how far they open that up and reducing the ability to prosecute individuals who are drug dealers, right? Like not co-users, but dealers. And how do we put that specificity into language? Is it based off of amounts present? Is it based off of past history? Like, that's where we sort of run into this lack of congruency on both sides of the house for individuals with lived experience and individuals working on the law enforcement side. So I'd have to go back into the depths, because when we had originally made this recommendation, I say we because there's like a turtle in my pocket, but I had pulled out some language, I want to say from Virginia and another state. So that's something that could be forwarded or put as far as backup, maybe like last year's recommendations, and just to provide some additional context.
Thank you. If I could just add one more thing, and certainly I think this is worthy of a BDR. We as legislators have a December 1st deadline to present all of our BDRs, senators in specific, which is 18, and we will get 2 more during session. So hopefully, if you decide you want to move forward with this and checking to see if the Attorney General has some BDRs he wants to use, if you're looking for an author, I'm going to hold back a bill or two for like about a week before the deadline. If you could, Dr. Holmes, if you don't mind reaching out to me and letting me know if you need a sponsor, I would love to work with you on this.
Absolutely. Sold.
Okay.
Yeah, and I believe the Attorney General's office has submitted theirs already. I think they had an earlier date, so, but I will double check that.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to the next recommendation, number 5, which is submitted by Senator Stone to implement a voluntary program to install drug take-back bins in retail pharmacies. And again, there were no suggested revisions, but Dr. Dixon noted she was involved in a drug take-back day a few years ago, and they did not get a lot of opiates, but did get other medications. So she recommended the bins may need to be emptied as frequently as every other day. So if there's any other questions or discussion.
I just want to add, if I can, that this is a bill that turned into a law in the state of California that I authored when I was in the state Senate in California. It was a bipartisan bill. The goal was to get expired narcotics out of people's medicine cabinets in their bathrooms and have an appropriate place for them to discard them without flushing them down the toilet, which means that they end up in Lake Mead and all through all the water treatment plants. It's very difficult to filter out drugs, and so there's trace elements and even our drinking water. I hate to admit, but that is the truth. Studies have shown that. So this was a bill that was actually pretty well received last session, but the problem was funding. The business community was concerned that even though it was voluntary, that we would come back and make it mandatory, which was never on the agenda. And I don't think that every pharmacy needs to participate. I just think we need to just look at all the zip codes and just make sure that there's a convenient place throughout the state for people to discard the medicines. And I was looking for some opiate money, seed money, to pay for the bins and begin the process of destroying these drugs and getting them potentially off the street. So.
Yeah, it's a great suggestion. I would add that I know that some of the prevention coalitions, that they do assist with the take back days. And I believe I've seen some proposals where they're talking about having some of these drug take back bins, not necessarily in pharmacies, but located conveniently. And I think in the past, it was highlighted that, you know, we have these that many are at the law enforcement agencies, but a lot of people don't want to walk into a police station to drop them off. So
Exactly.
any other questions or discussion? I think we can move on to the next. As I highlighted earlier, this was revised from the 2022 and then removed from the 2023 annual report rankings. If we want to consider adding this is the review the operations and lessons learned from Clark County's overdose fatality review task force, which is its opioid task force. And after their report is released in December 2024, and take this into account when supporting legislation to establish regional overdose fatality review committees, allowing flexibility as to the makeup and practice, and for the OFR to remain at the county or regional level as needed to effectively identify system gaps and innovative community-specific overdose prevention and intervention strategies in accordance with established best practices such as BJA's overdose fatality review. Is there any discussion or questions from the committee members? I would just start by saying, I think based off of what we heard from the Clark County opioid task force review, this merits moving it forward again, but I would love to hear from my other committee members.
This is Shayla. I would agree that it merits moving it forward. I think it was beneficial to hear that it was better as a region. And I think that aligns with the way our regional behavioral health system is set up. And I think that that would work for some of our smaller counties, because I think that's been part of the, how do we develop a system like this that works for areas that see maybe a opioid overdose every couple of years. So I think there's definitely some work to be done in figuring out what that subcommittee needs to be comprised of. I think making it too big makes it really hard for some of the smaller regions to accomplish. I also have some concerns because it sounds like the coroner is super important, but I think there's very few of them that cover the full rural region. And so what kind of burden would that look like on them? And what kind of support would we need to try to build into this for the coroner? Do we really just need their data, or do we need their knowledge too? And it sounds like her knowledge was really critical. So, while I think this is important to move forward, and I think it's got some great benefits that are going to come out of it, I mean, them just identifying the heat correlation alone shows a way to get ahead of the community response side of it. But, and that just came out of 1 year pilot. But how do we do that works for the state balance? I think is going to take some creativity.
Yeah, and Shayla, I would highlight too, the coroner is I think an integral piece. The coroners are involved in many other fatalities reviews as well, such as suicide, child death, you know, and other ones. So the consideration for their time is important, and they may be able to delegate that to other people on their staff. It may not have to be the coroner themselves, but some of their, you know, their forensic people within the coroner's office. And I would wonder if too, we would perhaps add something about this being funded out of opioid litigation settlement funding to start these, because I know funding, not just funding, but resources were considerations as well. But that might be something we should add is looking at this being funded initially out of the Fund for a Resilient Nevada.
I agree with that 110%. I think that's brilliant. Weren't we? I know I didn't dream this because my brain doesn't work this way, but I think that we had a presentation from a coroner at one point in time, and we were trying to push forward some recommendation in regards to getting them additional support, maybe. And perhaps this is one of those two birds and one stone sort of thing where we're able to get maybe a coroner's assistant or an additional forensic position created out of opioid funds, so that way they actually can do all these death reviews and provide this level of data and forensic oversight.
You didn't make that up. Dr. Knight did present to us, and it was her recommendation. And to follow up, one of the things, her recommendation was to go back and do an audit to see if the rural counties who refer to Clark or Washoe for their either autopsies or additional toxicology is being done. So one of the things the staff is doing is going back to whoever originally submitted that that legislation for them to make the recommendation or to go forward with the audit. But there was the addition of having additional positions, because especially through some of their grants and things, they're very limited on what positions they or what can be funded, and typically positions isn't one of the things that can be funded. So it might be a case of bringing back that recommendation too, about adding additional personnel. And I think, Christine, that was originally yours, about adding a forensic toxicologist. Do you remember?
Yeah, Christine Payson for the record. That was my reference going forward with some of the drug-induced homicide laws, because they said they would need this toxicology report to say specifically what caused the death, and there's almost always polysubstance on board for these overdoses.
Thank you. Crystal just added that the recommendation that a compliance study be completed on NRS 259.050, number 3, and 259.053, provide adequate funding for medical examiner offices to include death scene investigations, forensic pathologists, forensic epidemiologists, and toxicology testing to determine specific cause of death. Thank you, Crystal, for pulling that up. So it sounds like we may need to maybe just add in here about the funding for these would come from the Fund for Resilient Nevada, and then also support having funding for additional support for the coroner's offices. Did I get that correct?
I think so. This recommendation is going to need 2 slides by the time we're done.
Yeah.
Dr. Kurza, Crystal Duarte for the record, I am ready to make some live edits if we would like to do that, because I know next we need to rank our recommendations in order to be prepared for the December surge meeting.
Right.
So I was tracking on a different note-taking page over here and would love a suggestion from you or another subcommittee member as to how to revise this. And I can't even find my mouse right now, so that's not good.
I think it was going to be, you could just put another sentence at the end of this and put that the recommendation be funded out of the Fund for Resilient Nevada, or funding be provided through the Fund for Resilient Nevada. And to support this, additional funding may need to be provided to the coroner or medical examiner's office for personnel.
Mhm.
I think that gets the gist of what our discussion was.
Okay.
Committee members, does that look good to you?
Christine Pace, for the record, looks good to me.
Looks good.
Okay, great. I think then we can move on to the next, which is the ranking of the recommendations. And Crystal can probably go into this much more detail than I, but just to let the committee member know that we'll be using a formula as was done in the past. It's in Excel to provide a final ranking for the recommendations, and the formula weighs each ranking. Weights are determined based off their relative priority. 1 is 8 points, 2 is 7 points, 3 is 6 points, 4 is 5 points, and 5 is 4 points. And then each member will need to verbally prepare their rankings. And as they do, SEI staff will enter their rankings into the Excel spreadsheet and then double check your rankings once to make sure they were entered correctly. And then we'll call for a vote on moving the recommendations forward as ranked. Crystal, is there anything you want to add?
Yes, I would just add that we have now 6 recommendations with the revision that was just made to the that recommendation on opioid task force. And that will be displayed on the screen so you can see what that language is. I did send the other recommendations out to committee members. They're also on slides, but I think what we wanted to do with your permission, Chair Kearns, is maybe take a quick break for members to review all 6 recommendations now and determine which order they would rank them in, with 1 being your highest priority recommendation. And
That sounds, yeah, that sounds good. I was going to say, let's take about 3 minutes so the committee members can look at the recommendations and rank them. And then we'll go through adding them to your Excel spreadsheet.
so members can see them all in one place. I know this is difficult to see. This is what we'll be using to record your rankings. Is this Excel sheet. So I'm trying to get it visible. I don't know that I can. So please rely on your notes. And if you need me to go back to a certain slide, I'm happy to do that.
And what was it? It was 7, the highest, is that right? 7?
Rank your top priority as number 1.
Okay,
And you should have 6 recommendations ranked.
okay. Thank you.
This is Christine Payson for the record. I'm having trouble trying to do this on my phone, so you might see me logging in as an additional person to see if I can get it to work on my laptop.
Thanks, Christine, for letting us know.
And Christine, Crystal Duarte, for the record, I would just note that you don't have to do anything on the screen. We're going to take your ranking verbally so that the public is aware of how everyone has voted, and we will record it. So you could just be working on a separate piece of paper.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
By my count, that's been 3 minutes, and maybe we can put Christine as the last to put her data in. But Crystal, you want to go ahead and it looks like Dr. Holmes is first.
And this is Crystal Duarte for the record. I would just double check that my colleague Mary is ready as well. She's going to be taking down your recommendations into this Excel sheet. Please review them after you have given her the ranking to make sure that she has transferred what you've said into the sheet correctly. Mary, are you ready? Oh, she said yes.
There's no pressure here going first. Thanks, Dr. Prince. Like, how hard is it to rank these? Like, that's like really, really, really hard. So what my thought process was, I just want to like spit this out before I tell you my order. It was what I think is going to make the biggest impact right now and downward. That was it for me, right? Like in my little silo of the world. So number one was recommendation number 2, the data component piece. Number 2 was the opioid fatality review. Number 6. Number 3 was the Good Samaritan language, which was number 4. Number 4 was the recidivism definition, number 1. Number 5 was the wastewater review, number 3. That's not confusing in itself. You're doing a great job, Mary. And then my number 6 was the voluntary take back bins. I think that it's a fabulous concept, but I do also think if it's voluntary, we could do it without anything. So that's where, or we could write a grant or something, but I still think it's important. I think it's a good recommendation that we have in our report.
Thank you for going first. I was going to offer to go, but you jumped in there before I did. Am I next then, Crystal, to make it easy just to go across?
That would be great. I just would ask Dr. Holmes if she doesn't mind looking at that and double checking. It sounds like Mary did get it correct, but you're right. It's a little confusing with ranking numbers and recommendation numbers.
I think it looks right. The only one I can't see is number 4, but the other ones are right. So that's, oh, there it is. 4's up top. Okay. Yep. I can see them all. Thank you.
Okay, if you're ready, I'll go ahead and go next. And I'll start by saying I did what Shayla did as well and looked at impact, but I also looked at things that were previously submitted as recommendations, and some of it is follow-up. So I'll start by saying my first recommendation was recommendation number 2, which was the statewide data sharing agreement. My second recommendation was recommendation number 3 about the wastewater sampling. My third recommendation was, which is now recommendation number 6, the overdose fatality reviews. My number 4 recommendation was number 4 about results of conflict between Good Sam and the drug-induced homicide. My number 5 was recommendation number 1, which is the definition for recidivism. And my number 6 was the implementation of the voluntary programs for the drug take back. And it looks like mine were entered incorrectly. We'll go to Nancy Lindler next.
Okay, so my first recommendation is number 4, the Good Samaritan language. My second recommendation is number 5, the take back bins. My third recommendation is number 3, the wastewater. My number 4 recommendation was number 1, the definition of recidivism. Number 5 for me was the number 6 opioid task force. I think I got that right. And then the final one for me was number 6, the number 2, the data sharing.
Do those look like they're entered correctly, Nancy?
Yes. Yeah, they do.
Great, thank you. If we can, we'll skip over Christine so we can allow her the time to finish and go to Senator Stone.
Thank you. My first proposal is number 3, supporting the collaborative proposal for the Fund of the Resilient Nevada to conduct water sampling. My number 2 was excuse me 1 second here. Sorry, I had somebody calling through here. Let me get back. Okay, so my number 2 was proposal number 4, resolve the conflict between Good Samaritan Drug Overdose Act. My third proposal is proposal number 2 on the research and implementation of statewide data sharing. My number 4 is implement number 5, implement a voluntary program to install drug take-back bins. Number 5 is proposal number 1, recommends to the agencies under the legislative, judicial, and executive branches involved in the detection and diversion programs. And my number 6 is proposal number 6, review the operations and lessons from the Clark County Regional Opioid Task Force.
Thank you, Senator Stone. Do those look like they're entered correctly?
Yes, thank you.
Great. And Christine, I'll go to you if you had time to look at those and rank them.
I did. My number 1 is going to be number 2 regarding the data sharing. My second rank is going to be number 3 regarding the wastewater. Number 3 is going to be number 6 regarding overdose fatality review. Number 4 is going to be number 1 regarding recidivism. Number 5 would be number 4 regarding the Good Samaritan law. And number 6 is number 5 regarding the take back bins.
And if you'll just double check to make sure she entered those correctly.
Yes, looks good.
Great, thank you, Christine. And Crystal, can I have you read the ranking then that came out based off of the weighting and everyone's voting for these? I think I can see it, but I don't, these old eyes aren't as good as they used to be.
Yeah, I will go ahead and do that. So this subcommittee has ranked as its top priority recommendation, the recommendation number 2 to recommend research into implementation of statewide data sharing agreements. Its second priority recommendation is to support the collaborative proposal to the Fund for Resilient Nevada to conduct wastewater sampling. Its third priority recommendation is to resolve the conflict between the Good Samaritan Drug Overdose Act and the Drug Homicide Law. Its fourth recommendation is to review the operations and lessons learned from Clark County Opioid Task Force. The subcommittee's fifth priority recommendation is to recommend state agencies under the legislative, judicial, and executive branches develop a definition of recidivism. And the subcommittee's 6th ranked recommendation is to implement a voluntary program to install drug take-back bins.
Thank you for reading those off. At this point, we would just need a motion from someone for the ranking in a second.
Move the recommendation.
This is Shayla Holmes. I'll second the recommendation.
Thank you for that, Senator Stone and Dr. Holmes. At this point, we'll vote for that. Everyone in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. And any abstentions? Hearing none, the ranking process has been completed. At this point, yeah, yay. A lot of work. Yeah, great work by everyone. Thank you for your hard work and research and putting these forward. We'll move on to item number 7, which is presentation of response subcommittee recommendations for December SURG meeting. What I will do is just tell the process that we went through and then put the order that we came up with and just vote it on forward for the SURG. And we had discussion in the last SURG meeting. I'll just bring this up because I know a couple weren't able to attend, that the SURG, the greater SURG, will then be voting on all of the rankings, not changing the ranking. So, you know, we're doing them per topic area. So we'll have one for prevention, one for harm reduction, one for treatment and recovery, and one for response, and how those were ranked. And then the SURG would be just voting those in as our recommendations. Is that correct, Crystal? Is that what? Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 8. I know we only have like 1 minute, so I'll try to hurry and get through this. I just wanted to highlight that at the end of this year, we will need to have some reappointments made, and of our subcommittee members, Senator Stone, who came in, his appointment would need to be redone for January of 2025, Dr. Holmes, and then Christine Paysons. So we will go through that process. Our chief of staff, Teresa, will reach out and get those appointments from the appointing body on that. And I also wanted you to think about in January, we will be reselecting the subcommittee members, subcommittee chairs, and a vice chair for the full SURG. So the members that need to be reappointed, that will happen. And if you're interested in staying on the response subcommittee, you need to think about that. Who is interested in working on, or if you want to work on another subcommittee, if anyone is interested in being chair or vice chair, and then if anyone is interested in being vice chair of the full SURG, just be ready for that for our January SURG meeting. And the response subcommittee will meet in 2025 as we have been on Tuesday. It's typically the first Tuesday of the month at 11, and it will meet 6 times. So just so you're aware of that for your consideration when you consider being on the subcommittee. And I hope you all will stay on the subcommittee as well. It's been a great group. Moving on to the next slide. We'll open it up to public comment again, and if anyone has public comment, we'll open it up. All the same information as I previously read prior. Do we have any public comment? I don't see any, but I fear that I may not. I'll just go ahead and read this to give anyone a chance. Public comment will be received via Zoom by raising your hand or unmuting yourself. It's limited to 3 minutes and no action may be taken. So dial 669-444-9171. The meeting ID is 868-3331-1069 and *6 to unmute. And I don't see any public comment, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 10, our adjournment. Again, I want to thank all the subcommittees for your diligence, your hard work, your research. I think we came forward with some great recommendations. Thank you, and we will see you. Our next meeting will be the December 11th, SURG?
So, yes, that's right, December 11th.
Great.
We'll see you all then. Thank you.
Thank you.